Okay, I think that's about it. I just want to welcome everybody, and I would say don't let people go off to the other theatre. If they want to come, they can come. It's not an Oscar performance or anything like that. So
come.
Let the common people come in. More coming. Okay, come on, hurry up.
More common people.
Tell them to hurry up. But I might just explain to everybody, especially those of you who might not have been here last year, what happens. It's very simple. I've got 4 people here who are distinguished writers, and they're very articulate. I hope that they will be funny, because the problems with half of these forums and gatherings is that they are rather serious, and the speakers are dull. I've specially gone out of my way to find 4 people who are not dull. So I hope that your questions equally will not be dull, because if they are dull, I will cut you down, and I will stop you in mid-sentence. You can
David, enough now.
You can tell me your name. You can tell us your name if you so wish, and even your profession. You can lie. You can tell the truth. You can do whatever you want. But keep the question sharp, intelligent, and short. And
values of the news of the world.
Will you please shut up?
I'm in charge. Stop while you're ahead.
This is an unruly quartet.
What I'm
going to do is
be quiet.
Is to ask each one of them to say something up to 5 minutes, anything they want to say about being a writer.
Is there an ear doctor in the house? It's gone deaf.
Okay, starting with A.A. Gill. You have 5 minutes, no more, before you shut up and let others say whatever they want. Please talk about whatever you want to talk about for the next 4 minutes 59 seconds. Right, next, Nicholas Coleridge.
No, he's on.
I just wanted to give you a taste of what this room sounded like without David Tang talking in it.
Mark those men and women.
Sorry, what was the question?
There was no question. Just say whatever you like to say. Say something intelligent and interesting.
Shut up. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm slightly concerned about why I actually have been asked here.
Yes, I'm having second thoughts about that.
Stop it. Is there anyone in the room who's heard of me ever?
Oh, stop being so vain. Oh, the vanity of the man.
I just wanted to know why, because none of the books they've got here are still in print.
That's the fault of your publisher, not us. They obviously want to sell off those millions of copies that they have not been able to sell from all those years and try to sell them in Hong Kong. Anyway, will you please say something sensible? Next, Nicholas Coleridge.
Well, I've been briefed that I meant to say something about why I became a writer and am a writer and what I do. I always feel a bit of a fraud, particularly in this group, since I think I'm the only person sitting on this stage who doesn't write full-time every day. I have a job during the week, Monday to Friday, where I'm involved with a magazine company, and then at the weekends I become an author, and I write like clockwork from 6:30 a.m. until 11 a.m. Every Saturday and every Sunday, and I write longhand, and I write very long books, and if you write 1,000 words every Saturday and then 1,000 words every Sunday, after 2 years you have a 700 or 800 page book, and that is the system that I have used for quite a long time. I write for 3 reasons. I write for pleasure, because I actually enjoy those 4 hours of sitting at a chair on my own, usually a deck chair, outdoors if possible. I write for money because I have 4 very expensive children who I have to educate and look after. And I write principally because everything that I do during the week is kind of like being at a meeting. It's 20 people sitting around wondering whether Vogue should do this or that, or whether GQ magazine needs this or that. And at the weekend of my writing, it's my private time when I don't need to discuss with anyone at all what I put in my books. And I get very drawn into the characters of the sagas that I write, and I very much enjoy the act of manipulating them and moving them around like chessmen on a board, and inventing characters and developing them over 20 or 30 years. My books are always just enough the same to please my publisher, because one thing book publishers always want is that you write the same book again. You will discover this if ever you have even half a success with anything. They immediately say, your brand is this. And if you suggest doing anything slightly different, they get terribly worried. So my books always have rich tycoons, sexy babes, feckless girls. There's a kind of recipe which I've perfected to my own satisfaction over at the last 15 years. I used to write non-fiction, and I did that for a long time. I wrote huge books about the fashion industry and about newspaper owners, including several in this city. Both those books each had 1 week, and 1 week only, as the #1 bestseller. They went from nowhere to 1 to out of the top 20. So for all time, my books can now say, by the #1 best-selling author, Nicholas Coleridge, although the weeks that they were #1
I said 5 minutes.
was 2. We're on 3.5 now. And that's pretty much about it. I think one of the lovely things about writing novels is that you're able to crystallize certain moments and times and emotions that you might otherwise forget, and to be able to pinpoint how you feel or how you think certain characters feel. And it's one of the great pleasures of my life to work on them.
Good. I feel that this is now 5 minutes. Tom Parker Bowles.
I feel like the sort of joker in the pack here. 3 very, very serious, hugely respected writers, and me. Why do I write? Because I'm crap at everything else, really. To be totally honest, at school I was like a ghost. I couldn't play sport. I couldn't do maths. I still don't know what goes on in the city and all this sort of economic stuff going on. I nod sagely and pretend I know what I'm talking about. I don't have a clue. So that is why I write. I like eating food. And also they pay me. Really, to be called a writer is a huge honour. I'm a hack, really. I have to deliver 800 words a week and then 5,000 words every 2 months. So this idea of, I love Nicholas, who, modest as ever, I have this small job in magazines. I travel around and get the right words in, argue with sub-editors, and generally just chuck my stuff in. But quickly, this is the glamorous side of books here. Adrian and David and Nicholas, #1 bestseller. My books usually plop into Amazon at about 3,000, drop to about 10,000 after about 2 minutes, and then go to about 30,000 and get beaten by books called, Knitting with My Cat. So you have to sort of, be quite sort of tough about it. The other thing is these 3 go on book tours like this. Huge theatres, glamorous, the cream of Hong Kong society. I go on tours where I end up in small, rural English towns, giving boring talks to about 3 people, one of which is drunk, one's mad, and one's a publicist. Or you go on book signings with the likes of these big boys here, and I end up just, who would you like it signed to? Because the queue for me is usually sort of my wife or something, and the queue for everyone else is going on. So you have to learn to smile a lot, even if you're burning up inside. You smile sweetly. Oh, don't worry at all. I'm sure, there's a bomb threat or a weather problem or whatever. So it really is, you imagine, when I first did my first book, I thought I would be in the top 10. I wouldn't mind being 4 or 5. I would quite like to be #1. I've never gone near a bestseller chart. It's not all glamour. It's very nice to be able to write books, and I do it because I fundamentally enjoy it and get paid, but I don't do it for the fame and fortune. And I think that's a good way of starting out, I think, on it. These guys do.
Well, that's a confession. David Starkey, the real slogger.
Yes, well, I became a writer completely accidentally. I'm really a historian, and I'm fascinated by the putting together out of the equivalent of a broken vase, a series of fragments, what happened or what might have happened. I suppose then I became interested in how do you communicate it. And I learned to write in the strangest way possible. We've been talking about boring writing. Normally, the most transcendentally boring piece of writing is a doctoral dissertation. Academic writing is universally awful, except for mine. And I learned to write doing my doctoral dissertation. I had not been able to write before that. I remember my interview at Cambridge, not the college that I got into, and you'll see why when I tell you the story. In those days, you used to go up to Cambridge to do a scholarship examination, and you had 2 days of exams, and then you were interviewed by the tutor for admissions or the director of studies of the college to which you'd applied. And I was ushered in, and it was Peter Mathias who then sort of declined from Cambridge to Oxford and went on. But at that stage, he was the Director of Studies at Queen's. And we had a very interesting conversation. And then he sort of glanced at my paper. And it was as though he was sort of picking up a used tissue, an oily rag. He looked at it and he said, well, I'm really quite intelligent, he said, looking at me, but adjectives. And he sort of spat the word adjectives. You use so many adjectives. And I think this is one of the great problems. Young people, particularly young boys, write in the same way they have acne. It's red and yellow and purple prose. It's acne prose. And it was doing my dissertation, that unbelievable discipline of having this vast amount of material that you've got to make sense out of. And what it taught me, above all, which again is rare in academic writing, is the virtue of narrative, of storytelling. And this is the point at which the good historian and the novelist meet. You find yourself using exactly the same techniques of narration, exactly the same techniques of character, except that we are dealing with material that we can't, or at least shouldn't, invent. Though, of course, some very famous historians, like Orlando Figes and whatever, actually do. But you shouldn't do that. So for us, the pleasure is the pleasure of the writing, as Nicholas has described it, but also a discipline. The fact that you cannot invent, the fact that your stories are made and fixed for you. But the wonderful thing and the best thing about being a non-fiction writer is that the truth, I'm afraid, is so much more interesting than any fiction. Who could possibly have invented a Henry VIII? I mean, think of it. You go, you know, as somebody terribly smart like Nicholas or Adrian here, goes up to a film producer and says, I've got this story about this guy who's got 6 wives, he cuts the heads of, 2 of them off.
We got that, it's called Stanley Ho.
Well, I'm sure you do, but... sorry,
there's a character called Stanley Ho.
Was that an autobiographical remark, David? I mean, but there we are. At which point, I think, as David clearly imagines that he's better than any of the panelists, I shall shut up.
Good. All right, we'll cut straight to the chase, and we'll start off with a question. So anybody who wants to ask a question, first of all, are there microphones around? Yes? Okay, so somebody, who wants to ask a question? A lady in the front, yes. Can somebody... Sorry? No. Oh, a hand in the sheet. No. Are there questions on the sheet? Ooh. Well, it doesn't matter. Can we have microphones? All right, you ask the question. You ask the question.
Thank you for the honor of
Not too
asking the
loud.
first question, and thank you, Sir David, for your
Ask the
invitation
question.
of
Ask
all
the
the
question.
authors here.
Shh, ask
The
the question.
first question is,
No,
what
just
are the
one question. Okay, ask
what
the
are
question.
the best culinary delights in Hong Kong, England, and in the world? To David, to Tom Parker Bowles. What are the best culinary delights in Hong Kong, England, and in the world?
The best culinary delights of Hong Kong.
I mean, Hong Kong, of course, is a fantastic eating city. Cantonese, wonderful. But actual restaurants as such. Victoria Seafood here. I don't know if
No,
anyone's
no.
heard
Why?
of it.
Yes. All right. Well, I don't think. I
you
think
want
you
the actual
mean, why
dishes.
is it that Hong Kong should have such good food? Is that your
No,
answer?
what is the best? What are the best dishes you think in Hong Kong, in England, and in the world that you have ever tasted?
What is the best dishes you have ever tasted in Hong Kong, in England, and the world?
Okay,
So three
Hong Kong.
answers.
Hong Kong. I would go for that crab at Victoria Seafood. What's that seasonal crab?
The
called?
wine, the
In
yellow
XO
wine
sauce,
crab.
yeah, the yellow
Okay. In
okay.
England, what's the best food you have ever had in England?
England's is I can bang on and on. If you really want to read a boring book, buy that. I mean, that would answer all your questions. But it's, I think bone marrow on toast is fairly near perfect. I know it sounds disgusting.
Where would you
but
get
it's,
that?
At St John Restaurant. It mixes.
Okay, St John
everything
Restaurant.
you need.
What's the address?
Christ, St John Street, EC1. If that means anything.
EC1. Okay. How
And
about
in the
best
world,
dish you
what
have
do you
eaten?
think is in the world? In the world?
I quite like sea urchin pasta in the south of Italy. It's sort of sexy and a bit filthy, in a very nice way. It's delicious and very simple.
You are a
Adrian's a much better
foodie
person.
as well. What's the best dish you have had in Hong Kong, in Britain, and
Ever in the world.
ever in the world?
On the
Yes.
moon.
Yes.
In my imagination.
Yes.
Thank you for that question, and I know it was well-meaning. Don't ever ask it to anyone ever again.
I like it.
It's one of the questions that we all get asked, and instantly your mind goes completely blank. And someone says, "What's the best thing you've ever eaten?" I just go eating. I did that once. What was it? I tell you what. The best thing I've had today was we had toast with condensed milk on.
I took him to the Dai Pai Dong.
I'm sorry. I grabbed the mic and I grabbed the occasion to ask Dr. Starkey another question because I'm an English teacher. I want you to teach the young people in Hong Kong how to write, as you do, the fabulous styles and writing skills.
All that's being very flattering. I think the important thing is to read people who've written really well. My style, like so many other people's, was transformed by a sixth form teacher who told me, read George Orwell's essays. And they are the perfect style guide to modern English. They're total antidote to my sixth form prose with its postular, spotty adjectives. Every word is weighed. But what's also remarkable, it flows. The thing that I always try to achieve with writing is to use the very short sentences that you will get in Orwell's essays, but also to make them flow. So you don't do a Hemingway. I hate Hemingway's style. The baka-pung, baka-pung, baka-pung. What you've got to do is to pick up words, ideas, phrases, so that it runs from one sentence to the next. You've also got to group them rigorously in paragraphs. The paragraph that relates to the idea, and that each paragraph must link with the previous paragraph, with the last sentence of the one and the first of the other acting as a kind of S, a flow. And above all, you've got to have something to say. The reason that most writers write badly is they have F all to say, which in French is called belles lettres.
Yeah.
Nicholas?
Well, I've got a technique for dealing with this, and that is that when you're two-thirds the way through a book, you make sure you don't look at it at all for about 3 months. I don't like to read like the first 20 chapters. Then I read it on an aeroplane. There's something to do with the oxygen going to your brain and one drink that you can look and immediately, I find, you can see where it's very, very badly overwritten. So I then go with a pencil and I cross out at least half the adjectives, as you say, and sometimes a paragraph which had seemed like a good idea at the time, but you can see is doing nothing except slowing down the progress of the book. So I think a kind of ruthless editing at the halfway period is very helpful.
Yes.
You don't rewrite as you write. Again, one of the things that I find I do all the time is when I'm putting a paragraph together, I look at what I've written, and at that point, try to find the redundancy, the overlap, and above all, break up sentences with more than 2 clauses. It's very rare, unless you're Cicero, that you should write a sentence with more than 2 clauses. I mean, really, Gibbon and Cicero are about the only 2 people who can do it.
My wife has 5 claws. Another question. Yes, that gentleman there in the white shirt. Can somebody give him... I think we need more microphones. There's only one guy here.
Why don't we give someone yours?
This is not a comedy show. All right, you.
Yeah, question.
Russian?
No question. I'll do it in English for now. All 4 of you, if you went to a publisher tomorrow and said, I've got a book in me, no problem. You'll be able to get something published.
Totally untrue, that.
Well, maybe not.
Untrue.
I'd like to hear about your experiences getting your first book published.
Okay. AA?
I was just thinking, listening to David talk about it, I realised I've never written anything ever. I was completely flabbergasted about those rules of how to write. I had no idea.
Well, it's about time to when you listen.
Pot, kettle?
Anyway, the question is, how did you get your first book published?
Somebody asked me to write a book.
What was it?
What was it? It was the first novel I wrote. No, somebody came to me and said, have you got an agent? And I said, no. And they said, would you like one? And I went, no. Why would I want an agent? And they said, well, let me be your agent for a bit. Anyway, so I said, okay. And if you get an agent, then you end up writing a book. It's like, it's you know, I mean, that's what they do. And I ended up writing a book. Not a very good book, but enormously good fun. The thing with getting books published is that publishers tend to look to people who do other things to write books. So they want people who are famous before they've written the book, or are known, or have some sort of track record, which is why they ask an awful lot of journalists to write books. Because they just assume that some journalists will already have a following. You don't have to sell that many books for the publisher to wash his face. The most difficult thing is to sit in a cottage in the country and spend 3 years writing a first novel and then try and get it published by anyone. And that's incredibly, incredibly difficult. But in my case, I was already a journalist, and that was why someone wanted to ask me to write a book.
Tom?
Sort of the same. I think publishers thought, hello, that name, you know, give it a publicity, so it doesn't matter what crap the book is. At least you can sell the crap out of it once it's done, which to a point, it could be you start appearing on programs that you would never appear on if you were just Joe Bloggs, a food writer. So you realise full well to whore yourself quite happily to whoever would ask to sell the book. But the same with Adrian. Write a book about food. Okay, what food? You sit in a meeting with all the publishers. Weird food around the world? Yep. Oh, God. And that was it, really. And there were no super advances. And it was a very nice publishing company. And I got to travel to Hong Kong and all around the world and eat. I sold about 4 copies, I'd have thought. But yeah, it was... it's an interesting experience when you go around all the publishing houses and you have to, you know, each of them, when you have to sort of sit and give your pitch about what you're writing about, and you sort of parrot the same old rubbish again and again and again. But I think it's incredibly hard to get into publishing without a journalistic background or a name of any kind or fame. You look at all these famous people in Britain, I don't know if it's the same in Hong Kong, you only have to be on Big Brother or something and bang.
Be on television. If you want to get published,
telly, yeah.
get on telly.
So
if you're on television, you can write whatever you like.
And they do, and it sells. It's like those big Hollywood blockbusters. They just want that big opening weekend. It doesn't matter after that. These Big Brothers, they're ghostwritten, and they clog up the charts like sort of fat.
David, you do a lot of television. Did you get asked to write more books as a result of that, or did you in fact have more books published even before you did television?
Yeah, I had lots published, but certainly the first time that I had a #1 bestseller was directly related to a television program, which happened to do very well. In other words, Elizabeth. But again, I think television, there are different sorts of television. Obviously, there's appearing on Big Brother or whatever, and those are these unique books written by people who can neither write nor read. And in certain cases could only read if their bras had sort of, binocular spectacles put into them. There's another kind of television, which is sort of boring stuff that I do. But what I found, I'm constantly asked, which do I prefer doing, the television or the writing? And I found actually that the sort of television that I do has improved me as a writer. That doing a television documentary makes incredible demands of your narrative capacity. It makes incredible demands on compression. One of the most important things about writing is compression. And one of my favorite memories from those very early days, in fact, doing the Elizabeth program on television, was I got the entire English Reformation down to 150 words. It's one of the most complex events in human existence. And I got my words perfect. We were in the long gallery at Longleat, I think it was. And of course, you do these very long walking shots. So you're walking over track and cables, and you've got to look meaningfully at this word, and profoundly disinterested at another word, and you've got to go off on the right side of the camera. And I did all of this, and I did it word perfect. And of course, in your early days in television, you're a little bit like a performing seal or a lapdog. So I looked at my director, waiting for a little pat on the head, the boy done good. And there was this look of sublime boredom on his face. Just like A.A. Gill reviewing my programs. And he, and he said, "David, do you realize that was almost a minute?" So I was sent away like a reprobate schoolboy to reduce the Reformation to 120 words. It's very good for you. Very good for you.
Nicholas?
I think the serious answer to your question about getting published is it has become much more difficult. And I think if you asked the commissioning editors of any of the big publishing houses, certainly in Britain and in America, they would say this is the case. They used to take far more chances than they do. And the reason that they used to take more chances is that bookshops used to take far more chances. And I think we're living increasingly in a world where 100 authors dominate 95% of all book sales. And bookshops closing and more supermarkets deciding what they want to sell. I think it's very, very much harder for people to break in because they simply won't take the maybe £30,000, £40,000 risk that it costs to do a first novel for somebody.
Okay, next question. Yeah, on the left. A girl, very keen. Blonde. Wait. The thing is coming.
Question for Dr. Starkey on research. The source material on people like Elizabeth and Henry VIII must just run into tomes and tomes. How much do you go back to the original material? How much do you rely on later biographies? And at what point do you stop agonizing on whether you can further finesse it? And then once you've started writing the book, do you continue to go back to the material, or do you have to be disciplined to yourself and say, no, I've done that, I've got to make the most of the material I have?
I always try to go back to the beginning. For me, one of the joys of writing is actually that direct communication with what a Henry or an Elizabeth wrote and said. The most amazing experience I can remember as a research student is suddenly going and looking at a document and realizing that Henry VIII had actually written this at a particular moment. Or a wonderful one that's written by a young man on the morning of his execution. He's 18. And it's a kind of, dear mum and dad, I'm sorry, I really misbehaved, let the wife down, extraordinary. stopping I find practically impossible. For me, in fact, the process of, and again it's going back to that dissertation, all the best bits of my dissertation were written as part of the process of writing. It's only once you've started to put the thing together that you realize where the holes are. And so, in other words, when you think you've put everything into perfect order, when you think you've got a complete argument, you get to that stage and suddenly you realize you don't know. And that's when the big discoveries happen. But you've to trust. Yes. Finally, you've got to trust. But always go to the sources. The disaster is when historians or anybody else copy from each other. And you then get a kind of irreducible, irremovable error. The worst offenders in this are, on the whole, a new generation of large-selling women historians. And they all go, women biographers, and they all go back to Agnes Strickland. The Queen, all these books on Queens of England, they go straight back to the early 19th century, to Agnes Strickland. And she wrote on every Victorian extraordinary industry. She wrote on every English queen. And they have quarried and quarried and quarried. And
including Quentin
not
Crisp.
Check.
Including Quentin Crisp.
Indeed.
Yes. All right.
He's post-Victorian.
I'm not going to ask the others because obviously they don't do any research for any of their books. Yeah, okay, you. Yes, the girl in the black hair.
Hello. Good evening. Last year.
Sorry, you're a man.
No.
You're a girl.
Sorry,
he changed to confuse you. That's right.
Good evening. Last year, Andrew Roberts confessed that his writer's block would be removed by the thought of the size of his mortgage. Now, dosh is dosh. Apart from dosh, what would the panelists do, or what caused the panelists to remove their own writer's block?
Adrian, do you have writer's block?
I'm a journalist. We don't get writer's block. I mean, if you've got a deadline and you write for a living, you just do it. I mean, that is almost the definition of a journalist, is someone who writes to order. And that's what three of us on this panel do. I mean, I must say, I think that the process, I know that for people who want to write and people who don't write, the process of writing appears to be fascinating. If you're on this side of it, it's the least interesting bit. Just as the dots are the least interesting bit about music, how you go about writing is really not the thing that preoccupies you every morning. You really don't think about it very much, and you only think about it when it doesn't work, when the computer breaks, or when there's a flood or something. I mean, mostly it's about what you're going to write and what it is you're going to say about whatever your subject is. And I know that it all sounds rather dull when writers try and answer these questions about, how do you write, what do you do? But it is dull because it's dull to us as well.
The thing about writing is you've got to write. Some people say, how do you write? In fact, actually, you've just got to get a pen and a piece of paper and start writing it down. There's no great mystery. You don't need to go to a cottage on Exmoor or go into a Caribbean island and take ages and ages. All you have to do is have a pad of paper and write it. Personally, I don't get writer's block because I'm driven by guilt. I'm made guilty by the publisher who's always paid me in advance. This is a very, very, very good reason to finish a book, because if you don't finish the book, you have to return the advance. The minute I
Only if you've got a bad agent.
Yes, you never return in advance. Don't tell them that. You'll just set a terrible precedent.
No, but they always ask, publisher, if you never write the book, they always want the money back.
No.
Also, my agent, who is the same, I
Change your
think,
address.
as Adrian's agent, we both have a very famous agent called Ed Victor. And he rings me about every 4 months. Nicholas, are you going to be sending me over the next tranche of that book which you promised me? And then I have to dodge him. But in the end, there's a kind of moment when you just have to do it. And I think if you have blockage, there's no time.
Tom, do you have blockage?
Not of writing, no. I mean, it depends where no, I'm not going to get scatological or shit. But,
you've got a wife to support. You can't
but
be
no,
blocked.
no. As I say, as a hack or a journalist, you send in. One thing I am fascinated by, I have lots of friends who are far more intelligent than me. They're, they're to get doctorates, and they're at universities, and they're academics, and in the city, but some of them can't write. And I'm not sure, I mean, I can do nothing else apart from occasionally string a sentence together. I don't know how easy it is to teach someone who has absolutely no verbal, how you see a piece of, when you're writing, there's a beat to it. How you
iambic pentameter.
Well, exactly, whatever pentameter it is. But I don't know, do you think, I don't know if anyone you believe you could teach someone who say, whose prose is lumpen and they don't like writing, can you make someone into a great writer?
Well, I don't know. But I think great writing comes out of great subjects. I think, first of all, it matters. The thing most important is what you've got to say.
Yes.
The carriage it comes in, you can fiddle about with. But in the end, it's got to be a thing that's worth reading and people want to know. I physically can't write. I'm dyslexic, and so I actually can't do the physical black and white bits, the squiggles. So everything I write, I dictate, and someone else actually writes. And I only ever give dictation to people who've got double firsts in classics from Oxford. And it's not because they're particularly good at taking dictation, it just makes me feel good.
Next question. Yes, the man in the powder blue shirt. Are you Indian? Who? What?
I'm a British Kenyan Indian.
British Indian, okay.
British Kenyan Indian, so take your pick of
British
continent.
and an Indian, okay.
And Kenyan.
Dual nationality.
Triple. Nicholas, question for you. Since out of the four you write fiction, like Evelyn Waugh did, do you base your characters on friends, and have you lost any as a result of that?
I usually start off with somebody, God, it's jolly nice to be compared with Evelyn Waugh. I mean, I wish. I wish. Yes, usually when I'm putting a scheme for a new novel together, there is, in the back of my mind, just a shade, a flavour of somebody that I've met somewhere, because I don't think you ever make up characters completely from scratch who are unlike anyone that you've ever met or seen or know about. So I have a kind of flavour. But I think when you start writing about that character that you're inventing, you quickly become imprisoned by what you've said about them, because every fact that you say about them drives them in a particular direction, which is probably away from the person that you vaguely had in the back of your mind. And I would like to think that no character in my books are based so closely on someone who exists that they can complain. I did have someone about 4 years ago sued me for saying that the character was based on them, and I received an incredibly unpleasant letter from one of the major libel lawyers in Britain. It ran to 4 pages, and it did take my breath away when I read it. But I replied myself, not using a lawyer, and I pointed out that 2 other people had already asked me to dedicate the books to them because they thought that they were the model for the character. And I said, there are now 3 of you, and that it really is based on no one. And it went away, as these things do.
But actually, were they right?
No, they weren't right.
Oh, right.
They were just elbowing in.
Okay. Who was it?
Someone you might well know. I'll tell you later.
Okay. Right, let's have another question. Over there. Yes, the man with the white hair, yes.
Thank you. Do our distinguished authors use e-readers, Kindles and iPads themselves? Do they think the transition to e-readers is a good thing? And how will it change what sells?
Yes, well, it's a predictable question, if I may say so. So very quickly, I know that David Starkey is an expert on this, so why don't you just answer very quickly, because we spent an hour before this forum witnessing David Starkey's incredible internet crossover from the physical book to the cyberspace, and I think he's selling many more books and having a great following. Isn't that right?
Gosh, I'll try and make my answer shorter than the preamble. But I think it will change things very radically. So far, what people have tried to do on Kindle and whatever is to make what's there look as much like the book as possible, the printed book. In other words, exactly as with printing, we've been here before. We had a media revolution in the 15th and 16th century, and then the early printed books, you tried to make them look as much like a manuscript as possible. I think we'll grow out of that very quickly. It will change. There'll be good sides and there'll be bad sides. A good side will be that the reason you're all here is that you somehow want to share in the processes of writing. You don't simply want to be passive readers. You want somehow to feel that you step into the mind of the writer. And that will happen more and more and more, the element of interactivity. But that's a danger. The wonderful thing about the book and what it's done to knowledge, and I'm repeating what I said before in the press conference, is printing fixed knowledge. You couldn't alter a printed book. With the web and whatever, everything is changeable. Everything is alterable. And indeed the level of interactivity is much nearer to a manuscript in which you can scribble, you can overwrite, you can alter. And that will have deep cultural disadvantages as well.
I thought I would never love anything so much as a paperback book. I think the way that you can read it in the bath, read it on a beach, shove it in a bag, I think there is something so pleasurable about reading a paperback, and then at the end of the process, if you want, chucking it, turning down the corner of pages. However, I've recently started becoming very keen on my Kindle, and I think there's something rather great about if you've just read one book and you're on holiday, you can simply download another one, and you've got the whole lot on this one little device. I think they're really quite clever. I like them a lot.
I just must say, you can't wipe your bottom with a Kindle.
Well, certainly a lot of people use that with your books.
Not twice.
Yes, oh, Gill, really. Yes.
Can you stop laughing?
I hate them. I don't use them. I don't like, and for all the reasons that that David said that David likes them, and all the reasons that I don't. I don't want to go to an interactive do-it-yourself film. I don't want to go to the theatre and have to make decisions about what the characters are going to do in the second act. If I buy a book, I read a book, I want to know what someone else thought. I don't want to know what I think about what they thought. One of the reasons that my day job is I'm a critic, and one of the reasons I'm a critic is, or anyone is a critic, is based on the assumption that some people's opinions are worth more than others. My opinion is worth more than yours.
I'm a believer in evidence.
Tom, do you use Kindles and all those things?
No. I love books. Fetishize is the wrong word. I collect them. I like the smell of them. I like a bookcase that I can look through. The smell of books. Even paperbacks. They all have different smells, old ones. I like the fact that I can look through my bookshelves and see, oh, that was when I was 14 and I got that book. It's a history of my life through... I'm not boring anything else with it, but it's a history of my life through the books. The Bath, they don't run out of batteries books as well, which is a great...
But they look so nice in a room as well. You can't have a panel of Kindles.
But Kindles I get. I love what Nicholas was saying. I got one of those iPad thingies. I was reading a crime book, wanted to read the next one. In 2 minutes, I had it there. It wasn't something I wanted to keep in the book. I just wanted to read it immediately.
But surely, isn't that bad to be able to get anything you want?
I'm interested in how many people have them here. How many people read their books electronically?
Oh, quite a few.
And it's
not
growing.
Very many.
It's growing.
How many people have never read a book?
I once was conducted through a tour by Alan Zeman, who is a very prominent character in this place, and it was a vast house, and it was about 30,000 square feet. And I said, but Alan, there isn't one book in your house. And he said, I know, I've never read a book in my life, and look at where that's got me. Well, there it is. So there's something to be said for that. All right, okay, at the back, where we haven't had, I can't even see, but I see a hand. Yeah. Go on. We haven't got all day.
No.
No.
Well, yes, but no. Can you switch it on? Yes.
All of you have had extensive experiences and very well-rounded careers leading up to the publication of your books. And I was curious as to what your opinions are on students going to university to specialize in writing or pursue a degree in writing.
Students, what? I didn't
Students
The
going
idea
to
of
learn writing.
writing
Creative
degrees.
writing.
Creative writing.
Creative writing, that's a very good idea. Very good question. Creative writing. AA, would you ever consider teaching a course in creative writing?
I don't think anyone would ever want to be taught by me.
Well, it's a hypothetical question. Answer it.
No, I think that the best training for writing is living. And I think that the more you do that isn't writing but is doing all sorts of other stuff will in the end make you a better writer. Because I go back to my original answer, which is that writing is all about content. And the more you've done, the worst... when I got into writing very late. I didn't really start writing until I was nearly 40. And I'd done all sorts of other stuff before that. And the one thing I had over the people I was competing against as a journalist, who were mostly people from universities who had done lots of creative writing and had been taught English and stuff. The one thing I had over them is that that's all they'd done. And I hadn't done that, but I'd done a fuck of a lot of other things.
Including that. David, is there such a thing as creative writing that you can benefit from, courses?
I think certainly, judging by evidence, again, if you look at the University of East Anglia's output, it leads to that dreadful and most tedious literary form, literary fiction. The Ian McEwans of this world, I find totally, absolutely, and utterly unreadable. And the sort of... we've been going on a lot about the F word, but the sort of masturbatory quality of that, awful, awful, awful. And they all give each other prizes. and sort of write reviews of each other, yes.
No, I've never done a creative writing course. I might have quite liked to have done one had they been around then, but I haven't missed not doing one.
It was at school. It was a dossy option with the teacher who was a bit wet, and you went and you didn't have to do much work, and you get away with. But I think we're talking back to that Malcolm Bradbury. He's dead now, isn't he, Bradbury? Yeah.
Very.
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 Anyway, that UEA thing. I mean, sit. I think you can be taught if you want to write science fiction novels, or I don't know. I'm sure you can be taught a structure, but you can't necessarily be taught how to make a good book by learning creative writing. I don't know. I would be...
Yes, I'm very suspicious about that. I think it's just exactly like running a course on entrepreneurship, in business.
Or PR or marketing.
It's the idea of having to go in and read your unfinished first chapter to 13 other people with unfinished first chapters in their pockets. And that would be hell, but nothing like as hell as having to listen to theirs.
Okay. Okay, yes, this very keen man. Yes.
You're writing a book, and you're at the beginning, halfway through, and you go, hold on, this would be a really good play, or a really good film, or a really good TV. Do you ever have any of those experiences, or do you just write the book and go, gosh, that was a great book, can't think of doing anything else with it?
Usually, if you get to that point, it'll make a very good paper aeroplane.
Nicholas?
Oh, God, I wish one of my books we made as a film. Every single one gets optioned. I get massively excited. You got a very miserable little check just to whet your appetite, and then they never make it. But I'm relying on it.
Yes. David, were you approached to do your first television series based on books or the other way around?
Oh, the other way around. The way I got into television is fascinating. Everything in my life has happened with former students of mine, either at LSE or at Cambridge. And one of them, a man called Charles Kitchen, was supposed to be going into the RAF, except when he actually got there, he discovered you had to do things like be sober when you flew a plane. And so he immediately decided he'd better go into television. And his first job was to find a historian to take part in what I think must have been, though we didn't call it that at the time, the first reality TV show on British television. And one of the figures had got to be a historian. And Charles who'd read history at Cambridge, of course. John Slater, the producer, said to him, "Oh, it'll be easy, you know everybody." And he's hummed and hawed, and, "Oh, this won't do, that won't do." And John finally said to him, "Oh, come on, there's got to be somebody." And very loath, Charles, whom I still know very well and still works in television, admittedly in the provinces in Manchester, Portia, and Charles said to John, "Well, I suppose David Starkey was the least boring." And that's been the foundation of my television career.
Well, there it is. Do you ever dream about your books being turned into a sort of Harry Potter?
Jesus, you try and turn this in a book about travelling around eating English food. I mean, that wouldn't even work on BBC4, I don't think. I mean, no.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Next question. Yes. Let's have a woman.
I beg your pardon.
Yes, there's a woman here. Yeah, in the glasses. Yeah, we're fed up with masculine questions. Can you pass? Come on, hurry up, for God's sake.
I think it'd be brilliant to speak at the House of Commons.
Yeah, okay, go on.
I'd like to ask a question about, this is a question from Dr. Starkey. What's the difference between fascination or obsession about the Asian emperors and the modern celebrities like Justin Bieber?
Who?
I suppose I'm equally ignorant on both halves of the question. But I think you've actually touched something very interesting. The people whose lives were nearest to a modern celebrity were absolute rulers. And it also is true of the early real kings of England and so on. Their private desires, lives and whatever, had this immense public impact. The great difference, of course, is that a modern celebrity is merely a private life paraded in public, whereas great rulers, their private lives, have massive political impact. So celebrity is a kind of self-consuming thing. It exists not beyond itself at all, which is why most celebrities of a shelf life, I mean, Andy Warhol grossly exaggerated. 15 minutes is the equivalent of a celebrity half-century. They have these snuff lives that come and go and are thrown away, whereas the great emperors, the great rulers, last, entrench themselves in memory. Memory and celebrity go together hardly at all.
Are you as cynical about celebrities as emperors?
No, me? What I liked most about that was someone calling you David Starkey. Which I think we'll use now forever. I didn't know. I've gone blank. I can't think about that question. I don't know anything about Asian emperors. And I don't know who Justin Bieber is.
Oh, come.
I must say, I don't know who Justin Bieber is.
It's Bieber.
A Bieber. I know the shop. I know Justine.
But about celebrity, I mean, I quite like this fact that celebrity is ephemeral. That it comes. I mean, not everything has to be forever. We can have disposable people. We have disposable pants, disposable paper plates.
A very journalist answer.
Well, I'm a very journalist.
Yeah. Okay, let's hope that your books might be disposable, and you wouldn't worry too much. Okay, let's have another. Yeah, okay, you, the man.
Speaking of writing, one very often deals with review and critics, some of which are perhaps some stern rebuke. How do you respond to it? How do you respond to critics and review of your books?
Yes, how do you... I mean, don't ask him, because
No,
usually it is a 4-letter word, followed by 3. Nicholas, do you get hurt terribly when you...
No, I don't. But I'll tell you, the key thing is you just have to hope that the first one is nice. I reckon if you have, once you've got 3 good reviews from people who kind of understand what you're trying to do and like it, you're in safe water. And then I can take almost any amount of punishment from someone who doesn't. I always read all reviews. I'm not particularly hurt by it. Julian Barnes came up with a very good idea once. I read in an interview that before he has any book out, he writes down on a piece of paper the 10 most unpleasant things that could possibly be said about his books. And then when a bad one comes out, he says, oh, look, they missed 7. That's good. And they make him feel better.
David, have you had a plastering review except by A.A. Gill?
I've never had a bad review by anybody that I respected.
Very good.
I'm also deeply sceptical of critics in general. Critics in general are a further remove of Shaw. You remember Shaw's remark about those who can't teach and those who can't teach on the whole are critics. There are 2 sorts of critics. Those who can actually do what they criticize. This is why a lot of book reviewing is actually rather good, because it's done by people who actually understand the process. It's why so much criticism in the media, in what it be, food, television or whatever, is actually rather bad, because the person has got no grasp of the actual process. But that's, and again, it's very important to understand that that sort of criticism is merely a little bit of the everyday gloss and amusement of life. That's fine. I've only ever once responded to a critical review, and it was a very long one, in a learned journal. And that was because the author had made absolute demonstrable errors of fact. In general, you do not respond to criticism. You're a fool if you do, because that merely prolongs its life. It will be merely a ripple in a pond. If what you've done is of any value, the criticism will die instantly. What you've done might last 10 minutes. So console yourself with that.
Have you had bad reviews?
Oh, plenty, yeah.
Only bad reviews?
No, I mean, there's some, usually friends give me good ones, in exchange for good ones back. But no, when you get a bad one, you sit and smile and go, oh, yeah, it's fine. But actually, you think I'll tell you, there's a couple of ones that, I won't mention her name, who writes The Observer. Anyway, but you do, you don't get hurt by it, what annoys me in this digital computer internet age is bloody Google, because every time you put your name in the book, usually it comes straight out, this piece of crap book, written by this idiot. And, this is the problem with the digital age now, that you can't you can pay people now to get rid of your cyber life, but it comes up again and again and again to haunt you.
Yes.
So it's a bore.
I can't remember who it was, but somebody wrote to the reviewer, he said, I'm in the smallest room in my house at the moment. I've got your review in front of me.
Voltaire.
Very soon it will be behind me.
It was Voltaire.
I'm sure it's not Voltaire, because critics like you didn't exist in those days. Okay.
Can I answer the question about criticism? Because I am the only critic here.
Yes, all right. Well, you just said that you don't really care. Because
No, I didn't say that. What I said is that I have had properly appalling reviews for my books, probably quite justified. And I'm rather pleased that I have, because I know what it's like to get very bad reviews. And they may ruin your breakfast, but they should never really ruin your lunch. Yeah. But the point about a criticism is that it's not written to the person who has made the thing you're criticizing. It isn't a letter from me to somebody who's made a television program or cooked a meal. It's written to people who buy newspapers or magazines. The person who's made the thing should already know what's wrong with it. I'm not a consultant to the business to tell you how to improve it next time. And that's a terrible mistake that people make about criticism, is they imagine it's personal. And it isn't.
Well, you could have fooled me. The number of people whom I know who absolutely hate you because of what you write about them can fill this room 4 times. Paul, yes, hello. Yeah, in front here. Man with a suit, properly dressed.
Thank you. My question concerns really the reason these gentlemen continue to write. Now, writing brings fame, perhaps self-fulfillment, perhaps the thing ends up on the telly, perhaps it brings money, not always, in Tom's case.
I can tell you it's all money.
Well,
I mean, I know these 4 people.
Okay, fair enough. Well, now, when they've achieved that level of money, success, and so on, why do they continue to write?
Because they want more money. And it's so English. I don't know why you're asking a question. You live in Hong Kong.
Well, we know Hong Kong is a money-mad place, but perhaps Britain is not quite the same.
I promise you, everything follows from money. And I know. I said, these are good friends of mine. I know they're complete mercenaries. Now, unless you want to contradict me, I mean, here we're very. Yes, Nicholas.
Yeah, I work in such an ephemeral world of newspapers and magazines that I find something very satisfying in working on something that takes 3 years. And when it comes out, it's a great big fat thing in covers. And I add it, and it kind of reminds me that I'm still doing something, and that I'm not just going to meetings, and that there's something that's durable, and that that for a long time afterwards, you get like this wash behind a speedboat of people who read it. And sometimes in the weirdest places, people say, I read this book.
So it's
or that
vanity.
book. And yes, it's vanity.
And
thank you for pinpointing that.
Adrian? Other than money and vindictiveness.
Spleen, bile. I know there is an innate pleasure in doing the thing itself. I mean, essentially I write in an essay form. Almost everything I write is between 1,200 and 2,000 words. And it's a very specific length. There's a great history in English and French and writing to that length and writing essays and writing, rather grand journalism. And there's an enormous pleasure in doing it well. And when you've done something well, there is a moment, there is 10 minutes of feeling quite calm and quite vain. And that is worth more than anything. It's a drug, and it's everything. It's being part of a culture. It's all sorts of things. But that's what I write for.
Vanity, Tom?
Vanity, money, but I have to admit, I really enjoy it. There's a feeling you get occasionally when I do 800 words a week, but you read a piece, and if you say to yourself, vanity, self-obsessed, all the other things that come along with it, you think, God, that's quite good, actually. I mean, not brilliant, but you're pleased, and you send it on, and your sub comes back and doesn't say anything, and your editor goes, that's all right. It's just a little 20 minutes.
Vanity, David?
Yes, of course. I think it's the fact that we all, 5 of us on this stage have, David. There's more to it.
I'm not supposed to be the one who's...
No, but come on. For me, I suppose, I've got a book that's been in me for the last 40-odd years and hasn't yet come out.
Wow.
That I'm still working on. In other words, it may never get finished, the last bit of my biography of Henry VIII. And he's someone, it sounds terribly necrophiliac, but he's someone I've lived with more or less forever, have got more and more interested in, and more fascinated by, and find it more and more impossible to write about.
Well, I'm not surprised if it's been in you for 40 years.
Eventually it may come. But there is, in other words, for me, there is a goal that I may get to that's kind of almost a mirage that retreats in front.
Actually, can I ask David a question? David, when you live, as you said, you live with the Elizabethans and the Tudors for so long, do you have to like the person you're writing about?
No, any more than you have to like somebody that you're criticising.
No, but you live with someone in the book.
You distinguished very sharply. No, of course you don't. What you have to do is to be interested by them. Okay. What you must not be is contemptuous of them. Some of the very worst biographies have been written by people who think they're smarter than the person they're writing about. And they produce appalling books. You have to be interested. That's all they have to be. You may like them, you may dislike them, you may worship them, but you mustn't be either contemptuous of them, and in some ways actually falling in love with them is very, very dangerous. It's one of the reasons why most of the stuff written about Queen Elizabeth I, especially by Roy Strong, is so bad, because people A, fall in love, and B, come to look like, you know, and that's terribly dangerous.
Glasses were not, the spectacles were not in existence then. Okay, let's have another question. Yes, okay, another female. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who is your author, hero, or heroine? So, an author
that
you look up to.
You run the very risk of being criticised by Adrian Gill for asking more or less the same question as this lady here. Do you have an author, hero, or heroine?
We were talking about this yesterday. My author hero is William Tyndall, who was the man who translated most of the Bible, not all of it, most of the Bible into English. He taught himself Hebrew and Aramaic, and he is responsible for an awful lot of the way we write and the English that we love come from him. And as David Starkey pointed out, he probably wasn't a very nice man. And I think that's almost certainly true. But I think he
Consoling, is it, Adrian? Yes.
What?
Consoling.
Yes, that's yes. You don't have to be nice. But he was a monumentally great man.
Tom, do you have any?
Millions, but I say, I mean, in terms of food writing as such, there's a New Yorker writer called Calvin Trillin, who has this sort of beautiful, sparse prose, and he writes about things like hot dogs and hamburgers, but he writes about them as beautifully as he'd write about a Rubens painting or a Wagner opera. He's just a fantastic writer, and I think he's a poet, but I haven't actually read much of his poetry, but he's a beautiful writer.
Nicholas?
My favourite four are Piers Paul Reed, Paul Theroux, Anthony Trollope, and Gilly Cooper.
In that order?
No, in no particular order.
And David Starkey?
What a Catholic selection! I've already mentioned mine. It's Orwell as an essay. Again, Adrian's point, as an essayist, beyond belief and beyond compare. They're astonishing. But again, I'm sorry, I disagree with on this point with what Adrian was saying about not being conscious about writing. I think however good you are, you can actually improve. And it's not simply content. There are lots of very bad books on rather interesting subjects. Lots and lots and lots of them. So an awareness. The problem is with writing, if you become too self-aware, you simply clam up.
Bertrand Russell, good writer.
Bertrand Russell is a sensational writer, except when he's writing about anything he knew about. The history of Western philosophy is rather tedious. Russell's letters are wonderful, and they contain the best description of what we've been doing now that I've ever read. He'd had an extremely successful, talk about a man who operated for money after he'd given his fortune away on moral grounds. But anyway, he'd had a very successful tour of America and hated the experience. And he writes this marvelous description of an American literary tour. This must be sometime in the 1930s, and the process of lecturing. And he describes it so beautifully. Casting synthetic pearls before real swine.
Right. I hope you're not swines. Right. Okay, yes.
Or we're synthetic, yes.
Maybe I'm speaking on behalf of the ladies here. May I ask anybody who's interested in this, what happened to the British writing scene? Are there any female writers? Because it seems that maybe this is Sir David Tang's personal preference. You always bring male authors. Anybody like to comment on this?
Well, this is only a second one, for God's sake. Give me a chance. But, I mean, why should you use gender as a criterion? I don't understand. I did ask P.D. James to come, and she did agree, but she was not able to come because she got older and older and older. She's 91 years old now. And she finally decided that she couldn't come. And I did ask another person to come who was a woman. I'm afraid, well, I'm glad that she didn't say yes, because in fact she passed away 2 months ago. So my encounter with female writers is not that good. If you're so smart, you bring somebody female. Right, next question. Something more sensible. Where? Yes, okay, you. Young boy.
Right back there.
Young man, yes. How old are you? 20, good. You look like 16? I don't think so. Okay, ask an intelligent question.
Does this work? Yes. Sometimes when I've done writing for academic or other purposes, sometimes I'll write absolute drivel and they'll think it's amazing, and other times I'll spend ages and ages writing something I'll think is perfect, and I'll give it to them and they'll think it's really, really bad. Has anyone here been surprised by an editor or a publisher in what they've had to say about your writing, either because they say it's really good when you know it's not, or they say it's really bad when you know it's good?
Yes. Well, Nicholas, have you...
I love the process of being edited, and I like my editors to do it in a very particular way. When they get the manuscript, they cover it with yellow stickers. I like it to be done in this very, very clear way. So it says on page 3, please add more about how Sarah would be feeling when her dog was run over outside her house.
No, but to be fair, that's not the question.
Yeah, I have
been
surprised.
Have you ever written something which you really know is not very good, and then somebody tells you it's fantastic? And then when you've written something fantastic and people have told you absolute rubbish.
Yes, that has happened. I think sometimes when you write much more naturally and in a very straightforward way, people connect with it much more. And sometimes when I've tried to work on something that's extraordinarily clever, I think it sometimes lost the audience and my editor.
Are you ever surprised by anything, Adrian Gill?
Yes, I mistrust my own judgment. I mean, I trust other people's judgment about what I write. In the end, when you write something, you give it to an audience, whoever it is. And as journalism, it's ephemeral when it's gone. But if you think that things that have lasted for centuries, Shakespeare has changed its meaning enormously. We have no idea what Shakespeare actually meant by a lot of what he wrote, and it's for everybody to reinterpret. So in a sense, a piece of whatever you write stops belonging to you when you hand it over. And I mean, as a journalist, I write for editors, and so I'm constantly asking my editors if this is all right. Is that, and they'll go, yes, it's fine. I said, did you laugh? And they go, well, no, not really, but it's fine. Fills the space. So I don't trust my own judgment about what I write at all. In fact, I try not to have too much of a judgment about what I write.
Very restrained sense of humility. Tom Parker Bowes.
I mean, with places that have been working for a newspaper for 10 years, you know your editor, you know your subs, you know exactly what they want each week, and you deliver that, and you know that when it's not, you just don't deliver it like that. It's just practice. You go to a new magazine, you're writing 5,000 word pieces. I check it with my wife first. I say, just be honest about it. She's honest about it. I get in a bad mood. No, absolute rubbish. What are you talking about? Storm off. Realise that she's right. Then an editor, Alex or whoever it is, a good editor is absolutely crucial, because you think you've done something well. Less of that, more of that, please.
Yes.
2 words. It's really important.
Yes, I mean, in my very small way, I always ask my editor whether she laughs or not. David, do you trust other people more than your own judgment?
Everything that I write is read by my partner the night that it's written. And his judgment is usually very good. Because, of course, I am an expert, but I am trying to write not for other experts. One of the great problems with most academic writing is that its whole is self-referential. It just goes round in circles, in this kind of narrow spiral. I try to write in a way which can be read by anybody of average education, intelligence, but can also be read for pleasure. And therefore, as Adrian was saying, other people's judgment matters. I'm not terribly keen necessarily on the judgment of editors. I think very often your stick-it business, they can be nitpicking. They're very good because they will pick up on detail that, you haven't killed somebody. I'm constantly, which in the Tudor period is difficult, but I'm constantly reminded I haven't killed somebody or I didn't get them born. They're jolly useful for that. When it actually comes to bigger structural questions, because remember, unlike Nicholas, but unlike Tom and Adrian, I tend to write in very big swoops. I mean, in other words, several, usually 150, 200,000 words. But also within that, again, to achieve something like the polish of the essay form, chapter by chapter. I think big books need to do that.
My wife reads everything that I write and crosses a lot out. And I take her once every... If I'm in big main...
You take her not enough?
No, I was going to say every 2 months I take her to
What, every 2 months you take her?
He said he wrote at night, after all. Yes.
I take her to a restaurant every 2 months where the purpose of the entire meal is for me to quiz her on the next few chapters of my book. It's as often
She has 3 courses of talking about you.
Yes.
That's enough about me. What do you think about me?
Exactly what she does do for her.
Once every 2 months. Oh, dear. Well, there it is. Okay. Another question? No question.
Yeah, there's a hand here.
Yes, okay, yes. Yeah.
Which other writer would you question to improve your own writing, and what would the question be?
What, dead, alive?
God. He's dead. A travel writer, do you say?
Any writer. Of course, a big question.
I suppose I'm going to jump in and answer this first. You really want someone whose writing you would aspire your writing to be like. So, I mean, I'd be fascinated to talk to Gibbon about the way Gibbon wrote, because he wrote in a particular sort of English, a Latinate English, which I would never want to write like, but I'm amazed and fascinated by how he did it, epigrammatic English. I would love to be able to write like Mark Twain, who I think is probably the best writer of the sort of writing that I do. And I expect that his answer would be as dull and as mundane, as unhelpful as mine have been.
Nicholas?
I'm such an admirer of the writing of Dominic Dunne, and especially of his novels. And I once did a thing which, in fact...
I think he's one of the worst writers I've ever
think he's
read.
one of the most wonderful writers. I can read them
it's
again and again and again.
Dreadful.
You're not alone in thinking he's bad. But I happen to think he's incredibly good. And I once did something which I'm sure one isn't meant to do. I cut out a chapter which I thought was so good, and I just spent hours analysing why I thought it was so good. I'm rather glad you don't like his writing. For a very particular reason.
David?
Yeah, I certainly think in the earlier stages of forming a style that is what you do. Again, going back to the key thing in my own development as a writer, my dissertation, I struggled and struggled and struggled to get it going. Unlike these nicely facile gentlemen, I do get writer's block, but only at the beginning. It's only normally at the beginning. Once I've got it launched, I'm happy. But with that process of starting the dissertation, I did 2 things. I looked at a historian whose work I enormously admired. And then, we've been throwing around great names, I then looked at Cicero and how he dealt with attracting attention. Because what every piece of writing has got to do first is to make you want to read beyond the first sentence. The first sentence is the great problem. And if you get that right, you've got to get it right both verbally, you've got to get it right in terms of tone, but it's also, as it were, the equivalent of a motorway signpost. It's the north, the west.
What's your favourite first line of any book?
Oh, I can't remember at this point.
Which
I mean,
book did that come from?
Literally, it's like Adrian. The moment you're asked a question like that, you go blank and you become a fool. I become a fool.
Yes. All right. Another question. Okay, over there.
At the risk of producing a bad seller. That's brilliant.
Okay, over there. Okay, come on. Well, whoever. All right, pass it back to him then. We'll come back to you later. This man with the orange stripe on his okay, all right, you. All right, yeah, okay, that's the one.
Why do the panel think that female characters get sexier as the novelists get older?
Why, you better answer that. That is so funny, because one of the principal complaints made by my wife is that I always put in some increasingly disgusting and probably perverted sex scene into my books, and she crosses them straight out. I think it's
Are they going to be collected?
Oh, yes. They're going to be on the internet soon. I think it's just that classic thing of sitting at your desk and daydreaming.
Tom, do you have sexy characters in your... No?
Are
you allowed?
Lots of 6-year-old cheesemakers in Lancashire and pork pie makers and black sausage, black pudding makers. No, but you look at the really sort of pre-epic male writers, the Amoses, and you do find that the older Martin Amis gets, the younger the ladies get, and the sort of more he actually he's one of the few writers who's actually been pretty steady the whole way through his career on spending 40 pages on two bosoms. Yeah, I think.
Adrian, do you get a frisson of excitement?
Well, I did. I think I'm probably the only person here who has actually won the Bad Sex Award.
In a book?
What? Well, it's funny you should say that. Somebody once said, a photographer I was working with, a very pretty girl, said, "I've Googled you and I see you won the Bad Sex Award." And I laughed and I said, "Well, it's a literary award and we get it." And she went, "I'm not interested." Yes, I think there is a point. It was like Woody Allen films. There was a point where Woody Allen was still flirting with the girls who stayed the same age as he got older and older and older, and in the end you just thought, I can't watch this anymore. And I think there is a point when 60-year-old men talking about any sort of sex is all is sort of.
But you especially went out of your way to go and direct a porn movie.
I didn't just go out of my way. I went to California.
Well, exactly. Yes. Was it born out of a sense of frustration as you got rather old?
I was a lot young. Do you know David and I are the same age?
Yes.
You'd never thought, would you?
Yes, I know.
You're
juvenile.
You're ancient. I was a lot younger than we are now, and I did it for a magazine piece. But I've never laughed so much in my life. I had a cameraman who had an absolute horror of being jizzed on.
Please. Thank God 2 children have just gone out. Yes.
And he had to get very... It's a joke I never ceased to make me laugh.
All right, well, can't remember the question now, David. What was the question? Sex, yes. Do you... in the Tudors, which is a sort of a recent adaptation on television with I don't know who it is, but that young actor Maya or whatever, incredibly pretty wives, all 6 of them, and they took their clothes off and so forth. When you wrote about them, did you have any sense of excitement at all?
David, can I just gently explain? As you obviously have forgotten the question. My answer was going to be, I am not a novelist, and B, I wouldn't be interested in the women anyway. So, It's, on the other hand, Nicholas was saying, if only somebody would pick up what you've written for film, some of the wives of Henry VIII who have not been turned into material for film are absolutely wonderful. My favourite is Catherine Howard, who is undoubtedly the kind of good-time girl that you see outside Asprey's with 2 very full bags and a fat Arab in a Rolls-Royce, and she's exactly like that. But she's wonderful and minx-like, and in the Tudor period, where everybody, including William Tyndale, is getting wildly excited about religion, she just wants to have a good time. And the other marvellous thing about her, she gave me the opportunity to use in a deeply scholarly book the rudest word in the English language, because it was what happened to her when she was aged 13, behind the organ in the chapel. This is a Tudor.
Whose organ?
But it's much more extraordinary than fiction. The Tudor TV stuff is just absolute standard, three in a bed romp. What really went on at the Tudor court is utterly and absolutely and unimaginably extraordinary.
Well, got me going there.
What really went on? What really
All right,
Are you getting excited,
before we
David?
get too excited, yes, the girl leaning on the. Are you asking a question? Yes, go on. Where's the microphone?
Thank you. I'm wondering how certain audiences really affect the way how you write and what you write. And kind of in a follow-on to that, I'm wondering, in which ways do you like to engage with your audience, with your readers?
I want as many readers as possible who will make sure that my advances are as large as possible. But but doing what I want to do. You can do this in different ways. You can produce an absolute standardized potboiler. Or you can try to make what you want to do, the books you want to write, as interesting and as broad in appeal as possible. And that's what I try to do. I try above all to write to be enjoyed and understood. Very simply, but very hard to do.
I think one of the differences between writing a book and writing journalism is that in a book you can write purely in your own unadulterated voice. And when you're writing for publications, I think there is always in the back of your mind, whether you're writing for the Financial Times, or whether this is an article for the Daily Mail, or whether it's for the Spectator, or whether it's for Vogue, you very slightly alter the tone of voice for the publication, whereas in a book, I think it's all 100% you, writing for yourself.
Do you ever think about your readers? I mean, not those you criticize, but those who read about your criticism. Because we know what.
I remember the first time I did a book festival, and I walked in, and the woman who was going to interview me said, "We've had a very good response. We've got a full house, and they're all your readers." And I walked up onto the stage, and there was just a mass of grey hair. And I had no idea who my readers were, and I'd never thought they were these people. And I try not to think about you ever, and I don't want to have anything to do with the readers. I think they're weird.
Do you fret over who your readers
Nicholas
are?
is totally right. If you always write to the best of your ability, not sending dross, but writing for the Mail on Sunday is different to writing for GQ or Esquire, is different to writing for a magazine, a geeky food magazine, something like Fire and Knives, where you do the history of the savoury. I mean, God, that wouldn't get through my sort of commissioning editor, let alone. So you don't sort of write up or write down, but you definitely. Writing for men's magazine is very different from writing for the Mail on Sunday.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, go on.
I'm Cap from the city of Canton. Under the present, the contemporary circumstances of the world, and do any celebrated writers here have a soft spot or a weakness for the economic recess or the unrest or the coup d'etat? I mean,
Coup d'etat?
Yes.
What? You think
Murder.
there's a coup d'etat in Hong Kong? What's your question?
My question is, under the contemporary circumstances of the world, do any celebrated writers here have a soft spot or a weakness for focusing on the unrest or the economic recession or the coup d'etat of the world? I mean, in some corners of the world which have already broken out or will break out in some other places. Thank you.
Thank you.
But is it about writing in war zones or writing, travelling, or no?
Writing something relevant in your fictions or historian fictions. Okay.
Starkey,
I have the enormous advantage of very rarely writing about the present. That's why I'm a historian.
All right, he has no interest.
I've only one time covered anything of any seriousness at all, which was the Tamil War in Sri Lanka. And something grew up inside me that I'd been working on glossy magazines for 10 years and had written only things that were rather surface and glossy. So I did 1 month as a war correspondent, and I got arrested after 3 weeks and spent 3.5 weeks in jail. And that was where I started writing my first novel. And had I not done that, I probably never would have written one. You need time.
Yes.
Time on your own.
This is the key to Geoffrey Archer's success, isn't it? Yes. Actually,
but you have gone to many war-torn places and written pieces on war and restitution.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do seek them out, and I do like to go to them, and I work quite a lot with NGOs. I try and write a lot about Africa. I do wars and famines and things. I was just now thinking about how to get to the Horn of Africa. I do it partly because it's my job. I'm a journalist, and that seems to be part of being a journalist. Partly excitement. I hate being frightened, and it's sort of constantly confronting. I mean, I'm a terrible coward, and it's confronting your cowardice all the time. But also because the rest of my life I spend eating in restaurants, being fawned over by maitre d's, sitting with my hands down in front of my trousers watching television, and doing holiday, staying in hotels and writing about holidays. And there is a point where I could really think that was all life was, and that's all that was valuable in life. And I need to go out and not, I hope, in a sort of Victorian missionary sense, but I just do want to go and see what the other bits of the world are like.
Have you ever been to a dangerous situation?
I write about food. I can't bear the idea of, food's wonderful and universal and everything, but the idea of going to a war zone to write about food seems distasteful in the extreme.
You're not listening to your answers. You're taking pictures. Okay. Yes. Okay. Good. Very pretty girl there.
My question is for David Starkey. Following what you said earlier about writing a possible new biography about Henry VIII, how easy or difficult is it to go through maybe resources or evidence you've been before to write new material?
I think it's relatively easy because, of course, history is as much about how you assemble the pieces together as the pieces themselves. What you're trying to do is to make patterns. But you're making patterns with givens. I think, in fact, what all of us on this platform do is a branch of human pattern-making activity. All forms of human activity, be it painting, be it music, be it scientific research, they're aspects of pattern-making. It's what is peculiar about a human being and humanity. And as a historian, you've got several criteria to fulfill, but you're trying to make a pattern that is as exhaustive of the information as possible, leaves as little out as you can, but also corresponds to what is probably an absurd and preposterous idea, which is a novelish idea, which is, does this make sense to you? Can you comprehend this? Whilst at the same time, of course, being aware that their behavioural patterns and cultural assumptions are wildly different. You know, the L.P. Hartley, the past is another country. But no, it's the readdressing of evidence is what you have to do. And when people ask me, do I find new things, the place that you find them are the most obvious places. If you want to discover the great secrets of English history, don't go to provincial, or indeed the history of any other country. Don't go to obscure archives. Don't go to little local department archives in France or county record offices in England. Go to the main national archives. Historians have browsed through them at high speed, and then it goes into the main historical record, and the detail, the novelty, the fascination, the singular, the peculiar.
All right. Long enough. Yes, you.
For the writers who come from a journalistic background.
Just ask. I mean, everybody can answer whatever question it is.
Okay.
Otherwise, you will pretend that, somebody was superior and somebody was inferior. Just ask the question.
What made you jump from journalism into book writing, and what would you say is the biggest challenge for journalists, to become a writer?
Right, you're a journalist, right? So obviously you want to know how do you go from being a journalist to a writer. You're both, right? So you do it simultaneously, I suppose.
I'm a journalist who has books published. I mean, I know which side of the fence I'm on. I'm never going to be a writer who does journalism. I am a journalist who occasionally publishes books. And I don't have two gears to write in, so I just write the best I can whatever I'm doing. But I know there have been many journalists who have gone on to become, Charles Dickens, gone on to become authors. That's not me. Do you
want to do that,
no.
Tom?
No, it's
not you.
I like journalism's bread and butter. If a book comes along, you leave it to the last moment, you panic, you push it all in 2 weeks when you should have done it over a year, and you wish that you could go back to the nice weekly thing of 800 words or 1,000 words. I like the short space.
David, would you ever consider being a journalist?
I do. I
do?
write quite a lot. I enjoy it. It's a very different experience. It's a short, sharp shock. You often have to write it in the space of 2 or 3 hours. There's a kind of driving urge. Once you're getting towards the end, that final well, we better not go into too much detail, but you get the sense, that final climactic last paragraph. Oh, it's very nice.
Yes,
very enjoyable. Yes. But I'm a writer and a historian who happens. Let's get it the orders the right way round, as Adrian was saying. I'm completely the opposite. I'm a historian and writer who happens occasionally to do a bit of journalism.
Do you write as a journalist?
Like me?
Yes.
For many years, I earned my living as a journalist. Yes.
Oh, really? I thought you were managing director of Condé Nast.
I do so many things.
Write books. Well, there it is. Okay. Yes, you tried to ask a question which you didn't manage to last time. Let's ask him. We've got 20 more minutes. Okay.
Book awards. Are there any you covet? Are there any you rate?
Oh, I'm not the person to ask.
Booker Prize? Nicholas, you
I long to win the Booker Prize. The only one I've ever won is something called, and this is the most embarrassing name, the W.H. Smith Thumping Good Read Award. My publishers rang up. They were so excited that I'd won this award. I felt only shame when I went along to collect it.
Well, I've won a W.H. Smith too, and I thought it was rather good because it's the only prize that's actually determined by readers, as opposed to a cabal of these dreadful things called critics. So I very, very much approve of the W.H. Smith Prize.
Do you pay any attention
I'd
to
have
the Booker
loved
Prize?
it even for thumping good read.
Yeah. Do you pay any attention to the Booker Prize?
I was once longlisted for it, foolishly. No, I don't think I'm ever really going to be up for literary awards.
No, the food.
Wistful note.
Yes. All right, okay, well, that's that. All right, let's have a few more questions. Okay, good.
I was wondering with today's...
You don't have to kneel down. Stand up.
Okay. I was the obsession today with social networking, things like Facebook, Twitter, and all the language, the digital, like internet language that we use a lot today. I was wondering how that would affect writing in the future, and if they would have to include words such as wall, poke, tweet, and how that would affect quality of writing. And just
What was the first
in
word?
general. What?
What was the first word?
Tweet, wall, poke.
What's a wall?
Wall.
A wall is where you write on your Facebook.
Your status on your wall.
And nowadays, everyone's obsessed with social networking on the internet. And I was wondering if you were to be
You're talking about all
realistic-
the abbreviations.
Yeah, and, and the actual
ungrammatical
large
string.
part of life that is dedicated to the internet, that would have to be included in future
Do you
love
think it will
novels.
affect
How would that be
writing? Is that your
included?
question?
Of course it will. I mean, sorry. I think language, people bang on about, oh, this is a destruction of the English language. Language is a constantly evolving, fluid thing. And these words will, whether we like them or not, what's the one? LOL. My favourite one is FFS. FFS, for fuck's sake. For fuck's sake. That's a brilliant FFS. It's a brilliant acronym. I think that's fantastic. But these words are now moving into language as people 30 years ago, 100 years ago, 400 years ago, oh, it's all going down.
You're absolutely right. It's very convenient to have abbreviated swear words because then you get through the firewall. Because usually you can't, you get bouncing back if you send it. Do you think that the use of abbreviations and so forth, the style of tweets and blogs and so forth, will in fact affect the quality of writing? That's your inference, isn't it?
And I was thinking, how could you portray that in a lovely literary way? I mean, people are sitting in front of their computers all day and
I think
meeting people.
that's a much
That's what I'm trying to
question.
say. It's not about abbreviations, it's about your
That's
relationship with the
So
internet
why
and how
didn't you
that
answer
will
it
portray.
interestingly?
No, I didn't answer it at all, David.
Well, try. Go on.
I
That's what
think
you're
that,
here
that,
for.
that mobile phones have completely changed detective fiction. So television, detective films, have become incredibly dull because nobody has to wait to find anything out. Everybody can be told everything all the time. And it's really changed the dynamic of it. And I think you're quite right. I think that someone's tried to make one movie, You've Got Mail, about social
That was about
networking,
50 years ago.
And it was about 50 years ago, and it wasn't terribly good. But I expect you're quite right. I expect it will become what the letter was in Victorian fiction, or it'll be or something completely different. But it will change the way people write.
I'm writing a novel at the moment that goes from the 1970s to the present day, and I had to figure out when the mobile phone suddenly became an everyday object, because in the first half of the book, every phone call is on a landline. And suddenly, from about 1983, I think, when people started to have mobiles in a more common way, and it wasn't actually until the end of the 80s that they became a really major factor.
But how many of us how many of us do Facebook here? Did you have a Facebook page?
No.
Do you have a Facebook page?
No.
I have a Facebook page.
You do?
Yeah. So I can
David?
look at what my children are doing.
Do you have a Facebook?
No, of course
No.
not.
How many of you have Facebook? Oh, Christ. Blogs?
Twitter?
Twitter?
Yes, how many of you are twittering about this now?
Well, you ought to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
But sorry,
David.
There is a really very big question, a rather big problem behind that question. It seems to me that what's going on now with young people spending 13, 14 hours a day locked in a room, that all kinds of social intercourse that was the basis of the novel, the dynamic of the country house, of the village, or of the college, or whatever, all the standard novel types, I think will not correspond to reality anymore. And it's, again, interesting looking at a classic detective story writer like P.D. James. She dwells in a totally unreal Britain, a Britain that no longer exists. All the favourite television genre programmes of that are clearly a Britain that does not exist anymore. And it may very well be that our forms of fiction become almost hagiographic. They become, in the same way that I think England has ceased to exist as a country and has actually become a place of the mind. It's a notion. And so many of the patterns of fiction and the notions of causation and characterization in fiction may very well be slipping away.
Well,
No,
that's a very
because
intelligent
all of these things. The novel comes into existence at a very specific moment of time, in a very particular world, in which certain values were in the ascendant and certain values were regressing. All artistic forms are a product of a particular moment. In the same way, the art of the Italian Renaissance is stone dead. And when we use this word artist, to imply that the modern winner of a Turner Prize has got something in common with Michelangelo, it is simply silly. It's a perversion of language. And because again, we tend to think, we're so self-important, we tend to think that our own values are eternal. We're making a fundamental mistake. Artistic forms are products of highly specific time, space, culture, or indeed the clash of cultures.
Okay, we've got 15 more minutes. Let's have a few more intelligent questions like the last one. Oh, right. Yes. Well, yes, okay, go on. Yeah, at the back. The man with a suit, yes.
Nobody's mentioned Murdoch.
Iris Murdoch, she won the Booker Prize. The sea.
Now, I was thinking rather more of the contemporary situation in the UK. What sort of fallout do you think is the Murdoch situation going to have on journalism in particular?
Yes, well, Adrian, you're probably more close than anybody else on this issue. You write for the Sunday Times. He's your boss. What do you think?
I was in the select committee meeting. In fact, if you look at the TV reruns, you can see me in the top left-hand corner behind James Murdoch.
Were you whacked by Wendy Dunn?
It was impressive.
It was impressive.
And I went in. I sat in the committee. I came out. That next day, I wrote 2,000 words for this Sunday. What was it? Day after tomorrow. And that afternoon, I went to Heathrow and got on a plane and came here. And as I got on the plane, I thought, thank God, I don't have to think about the bloody hacking scandal anymore, because I'll be in Hong Kong and they'll have better things to talk about.
But but for serious, for one moment, what's going to be the fallout of it all?
Who the fuck knows? I don't know.
All right, okay.
You know, we've already lost one newspaper. We've lost the News of the World, which I loved, which was a great newspaper. And as we were saying before, we don't have that many newspapers that we can start throwing them away. You know, the point about freedom of speech is that it's not about the people who you agree with. It's about protecting the people you violently disagree with. That's what's important about a libertarian society. And I think that this is a sort of a madness that's come out of nobody who writes about Murdoch or about the press or about hacking or about any of this scandal. Nobody is a disinterested party. There is nobody who stands back and says, this is an opinion which comes simply from, as David would say, observing the facts. Everybody has a dog in this fight. And that, I think, is why it's become as hysterical as it is. Where it will end, who knows? I have a sense, I have a feeling back at home that people are beginning to think that in a week which had huge news stories, famine, a huge famine in the Horn of Africa, Europe, the euro collapsing, Greece, perhaps Italy going down the pan, Dominic Strauss-Kahn, whatever got him off the front page. We also had a nurse who was killing people in hospitals.
Nassau.
We had NASA. We had Walker. And we had the British Army got out of Lashkar, a place that it's been defending and has cost us a lot of dead soldiers. All of those things would have been naturally big front page headline stories, and none of them made it because we were arguing about people's telephones. I think it was a great miasma of hysteria. But where it ends, who knows?
Tom, you want to say anything?
I just think it's, there was a point at which it changed in the national consciousness, and it was just a whole lot of hacks and executives arguing on the front page.
They said they hacked your phone, and you have said you don't really care.
Couldn't care less. And why God only knows. Most people have probably been hacked. It crossed it when the Millie Dowler and the child, a murdered child, that was crossing a line. Who cares about celebrities, minor celebrities, whoever it is? You just don't leave messages on your telephone. Secondly, the fact that this whole thing... Imagine if Murdoch suddenly said, I'm going to sell the Times, I'm going to sell the Sun. Imagine who could get hold of that. And, he is, for all... Whatever anyone says about him, I think he's very much a journalist's, proprietor. He likes newsprint. He likes stories. I think he's done very, very well with the Sun, News of the World, RIP. I love the News of the World. Shocking sacrifice today. They should have got rid of the Star or something, not the News of the World. I think it's been blown out of all proportion.
Nicholas?
I think the ramifications of the hacking thing will go on and on and on. I think in 3 years' time they'll still be investigating it. I think it's probably going to be... I think that Rupert Murdoch will definitely, obviously, not be running his company by the time they have finished investigating it, and I rather doubt that his son James will ever do so. Because I think it will take on a life of its own in America, where they take these things so incredibly seriously.
David?
I certainly agree that it was a bizarre episode. The British seem now to be, for having been famous for the stiff upper lip, we now seem to go in for national hysteria. And this thing seemed to me to be a cross between Diana and the popish plot of the 17th century, with the same pursuit of the scapegoat and so on. It was, in many ways, very, very ugly. The thing that I found paradoxical about it was, on the one hand, this was an attack on the greatest owner of tabloids, on tabloid values, on how tabloid stories are constructed. But it only entered the national consciousness when it became tabloid through Millie Dowler. If it hadn't have been for the Millie Dowler, nobody would have given a damn. But that's a purely tabloid story. In one sense, who gives a damn that, okay, it's indecent and obscene, but it's purely tabloid-esque. And this is the paradox. The Guardian was pursuing this high-minded enquiry, but it's only once it gets deep down and dirty that it actually penetrates the national consciousness. And the same sort of thing...
And with hypocrisy.
Well, I'm arguing, indeed. It's a sort of hypocrisy, but it also tells us something much, much deeper about the culture. All the big questions about media ownership, about privacy and so on, really only caught the popular imagination once they were tabloidized. And I think this tells us something absolutely fundamental about our culture. It really does. The big questions, the so-called big questions, and Adrian was saying a version of this morning, concern very few people and excite very few people. And even when you want to make a big question popular, you've actually got to tabloidize it, which is why politicians parade themselves, why it's become a necessity for a British Prime Minister to have a badly disabled child. It's now not absolutely necessary, If Nick Clegg aspires to it, he and that very smart wife are going to have to consult with a paediatrician and manufacture one. It is, you can't be convincing on the national health unless you've got a badly disabled child. I'm sorry, I'm being brutal, but the thing is as mad and as disgusting as this. And if you want to understand this world better, read the greatest novel on the subject, which is Brave New World. That is the story of our world.
Okay, one last question, if anybody wants. Yes, okay, the girl there with a hand up on the aisle. All right, it's the last question, so...
It better be a good one.
Over there, behind you. Oi. He's blind.
Oh.
Hello. Have you got... Yeah, go on. Yes. Come on, wake up. Sorry, say it again.
In your writing.
Have you ever faced a bottom in your writing?
And how did you get through that?
A bottom?
A bottleneck, I think.
Oh, a bottleneck. What do you mean you mean a writer's block? We've asked that question. Right, next. What?
I see. It's another version of the same question, really.
Yes, it's very boring. All right, last question. You, the blonde.
She's got her hand up.
Quick.
Here he comes.
We've only got 4 minutes. That's better.
Thank you. Who are your favourite fictional characters?
Oh, right. Stupid question. Next one. Okay, the one with a paper up. I mean, it's like saying, who is your favourite composer? For God's sake. Right, the man with a paper. Yeah. Is there no incentive to ask an intelligent question being the last one?
Okay, I hope this passes muster. So we've heard about the
just ask the question.
Literary heroes and heroines. What about the literary villains? Or in another way, who are the most overrated writers, both living or dead?
Oh, where to start?
Now, there's a...
Most of them on the panel, I think.
Right, who do you revile, Nicholas?
As a writer?
Yes, anything.
I can't bear John Irving.
John Irving, that's all right.
Living writers, I think.
No, living.
Okay, I think you really want. I mean, there are sort of bad writers, and then there are really, really bad good writers. So it's reckoned writers who are simply awful, and you would have to go an awful long way to beat Virginia Woolf.
Oh, rubbish.
Simply dreadful. Orlando is possibly the worst good book ever written.
Oh,
do you think Virginia Woolf is dreadful, David Starkey?
I'd have put stones in her pocket
I find her completely unreadable. But I think there's hot competition.
Are we allowed to do journalists as well?
Yeah.
Polly Toynbee. Straight, not as a person, but as a journalist. Fuck, Jesus.
Yes.
If I want to get
Nicholas? Oh, yeah, I've asked you. Is there somebody else that you absolutely revile?
I find, again, an awful lot of the so-called modernism. I find Ulysses and beyond belief inane.
Finnegan's Wake?
Worse. I hate them.
I just bought the notes for them.
Yeah. But a book that requires notes, a work of fiction that requires this vast scholarly superstructure, and it's what kills a Shakespeare play.
How about T.S. Eliot? I mean,
The Wasteland is wonderful. The Wasteland is a wonderful.
No, exactly. I mean, you need notes for that.
Yeah.
I'm not
No,
sure
you
that
don't.
Joyce is very good.
No, I want Trollope. Not just Trollope, but people who like Trollope.
No.
You don't like Trollope?
Oh,
no, Trollope is good.
Trollope's dreadful.
Well, I mean, that's
like
Trollope.
Coronation Street with frock coats.
But that's what we all are. We're all parochial in our own way. I'm sure you, with your high-mindedness, that sound, extremely grand and so well, extremely petty, just like a parochial curator out of a
great unreadable book, Don Quixote. Don Quixote. Unreadable.
Unreadable? I think the Alexandra Quartet is unreadable.
I haven't made it.
I mean, I have now tried it 5 times, and I cannot get over the first one, which is called Olive or Justin. I can't remember. David, which book have you started and have never managed to finish? And you?
Oh, so many.
So I mean, really bad ones.
No, I mean, I had a phase when I read widely in fiction and really enjoyed it. One in my teens, one in my late 20s, and another continuing to my early 30s. I can't really remember a single novel after that I've actually enjoyed. And this is a problem with me. It's not at all a problem with the novel as a form. I simply am not terribly interested in the invention.
You've got a worst historian.
A worst historian? No, I mean,
Do you think Andrew Roberts is any good?
Andrew Roberts is a very, very fine historian of a relatively narrow scope of time, as most of us are. I think he's an excellent historian. In fact, what I find is interesting is that most of the well-known historians that tend to get rubbished by the rest of the profession are obviously the best.
Okay,
I believe in the winnowing of fame.
Last question. I mean, Tom, is there somebody else that you can't stand, you can't bear?
Lawrence, I could live without.
Lawrence, what?
D.H. Lawrence.
D.H. Lawrence.
Hugely overrated.
Yes. Well, there it is. I'm not quite
Gustibus
sure.
Nulles.
I don't quite agree with that. Okay, well, look, listen, everybody, thank you very much. 2 hours have passed very quickly, and I want to thank you all for coming, and in particular, I want to thank my panel. My friends are going to sign books, if you so wish, outside there, and they will go in about 20 or 25 minutes because they've earned a very good dinner. And I really want to thank you all for coming. And next year we hope to bring more people, and please tell your friends to participate. Without you, this would have been pointless. Thank you very much again.
Do you want us to know where the loo is?
Yes, in the VIP room. I tell you.
Oh, gosh. I can't take flowers into the loo.
Yes.
Yes.
Go through the VIP.
Oh, thank you.
There.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness.